Hey guys, sorry for the late arrival. Was trying to quickly send an email out and lost track of time. Um, okay, so small crowd this week, which is totally okay. There's not a whole lot on the agenda. Let's see, we've got a couple of PRs. One closed this week that was at avoiding flushing too much data at once from Ma Peng. We had mentioned that last week. That looks really good. So that's fantastic. And then another one that was updated, also from Ma Jianping. Reddick approved the changes to reduce buffer list rebuilds. I think he was also looking at doing that more generally. Whatever work was being done there, it looks like Radek thought this was good to move forward with. Igor, I think he had requested you to take a look and just verify you thought it was okay too. That's 36.387.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I've seen that. It's on my plate.
Okay, cool. Um, Other than that, I did not see anything else that had closed or was particularly new this week. So yeah, a little slow, but that's the summer. Let's see. Any PRs I missed that people are working on or anything interesting? All right. I don't actually have any topics to discuss this week. There's lots and lots of ongoing work, but nothing really interesting to report at the moment. Um, Maybe the only thing would be Josh mentioned a couple of interesting papers from, I think, both from FAST. And I was wondering if anyone would have any interest in chiming in on what they want to look at.
Can you send the link again to the pad? Or
Yeah,
in general, is it possible to add it to the event in the calendar?
I don't even see the event in the calendar showing up for me anymore.
You don't, oh, that's weird.
At least in
I,
the Blue Jeans calendar
I think
that I
I
get.
have permission to edit it. So I don't know if it'll change it to everybody, but I can add the link if you want me to.
Great. Yeah, sure. We used to have
Let
a
me see
calendar
if
entry
I.
that showed up in Blue Jeans, and I don't know what happened to it. It just disappeared like, I don't know, 4 months ago or 5 months ago.
Did you see it in the link on the calendar on the Ceph community calendar at least? Um,
Okay.
in terms of the papers, these are just some ones I noticed that looked interesting when I was looking through the fast papers from this year. There's maybe more as well. I don't think I looked through them all yet.
Personally, the RocksDB one looked interesting. I'd be curious to look through what they've been doing.
Yeah, I agree. Are folks interested in looking at their OxDB paper then? Maybe coming back and discussing in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I haven't had time to read even the abstract of it, but I'm down to go through it and then we can discuss it in like 2 weeks.
Oh, holy smokes! These guys were from the University of Minnesota. I actually know David Dew, sort of.
Oh, there you go. Got a it with the author right there. Find out all the crazy details of the implementation.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure that we'll get a whole lot of them. We'll see.
That's what I was kidding.
Mark, did you see the email I forwarded to you? The response from one of the authors of the last paper of MapX?
Yeah. It looked like they had just said that they weren't ready yet, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in what they are doing with Ceph RBD actually. It seems like they are still working on it. I'm not sure if if that means they are still implementing what they presented in the paper, sorry, or are they like improving it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, definitely follow up with them. I don't know. They were pretty short in their reply, right? They didn't say a whole lot.
Yeah, they just said they were pretty much busy and that the first author would contact me once they have some progress.
Yeah, I mean, if they have more that they'd like to discuss or showcase, definitely would be interested in finding out more. I wonder if maybe they're being a little tight-lipped if they're going to do like a follow-up paper and they don't want to like tell us everything they're doing right now to that they can present that later.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, does anyone have any opinions besides me and Josh about next paper for in 2 weeks?
Yes, I sent a +1 on the chat. I think the RocksDB one sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, looks good for me as well.
Quite relevant given all of the discussion about OMAP and RocksDB and latencies and everything else going on right now. So maybe we'll learn something.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I wanted to say 2 weeks from now is next week I wanted to have more discussion around O-nodes and once Adam is back, and we have someone new, Red Hat, Gabby Ben Hanouk, who's been taking a look at this a little bit and has some interesting ideas.
Yeah,
Josh, are you talking about Gabriel who joined the Crimson?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, both. I think both what Adam was talking about and what Gabriel was talking about look really, really interesting. I'd love to see what kind of experimental results if they pursue some of these ideas. What they might end up uncovering.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of it lines pretty well with like what Igor you were trying to do with reducing the memory footprint of O-nodes in your PR from in the past year. So being able to get much more efficient caching because we will be able to keep a lot more O-nodes in cache.
One of the things I'm really curious about, it'd be super awesome if someone did this, is look at what data in the O node we actually end up using. Like how much are we using different things,
Yeah, exactly. That's a major part of it that I'm not sure about myself as well. We've got a lot of pieces there that I'm pretty sure some of them aren't used very often, especially for different use cases like RBD versus RGW versus FFS.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, indeed. When I was looking at all this stuff, I have pretty much items which are not used at many scenarios. And I was thinking about implementing different structures for different object layouts. So maybe we can say for RBD use much simpler in-memory structures.
Igor, how crazy do you think it would be to store the encoded form of the data in memory and only decode on actually read, like for any individual thing that we're looking at?
I don't know, honestly. Mm, Well, I don't think this might was much benefit, but well, who knows? It's hard to predict anything in this area.
When you're
I
looking at
don't
this
think
before, Igor, did you like do any kind of profiling or anything to try to figure out which parts of the Onode storage were expensive or which ones ended up taking up a lot more space?
Well, there are in one of our unit tests there is trivial test case which prints the size of data structures, and you can also estimate. Well, there are some I'd say widely used structures like blob or extend, and hence you might estimate which structures it makes sense to optimize, but well, definitely there is no project report or something ready to present in this area.
Yeah. We didn't expect something to presentable, but just if you had a general idea.
Well, as I said, there are some pretty large structures which become even larger when you have some data in them, and so some of these structures are widely used for Node. Hence, well, that's the only thing that I used to decide which structure to optimize or not so far.
Okay. That definitely seems like a good starting point.
Well, other thing in all these on-node structures, which I don't like much, is all this sharding stuff, which pretty predictable and non-straightforward. And honestly, I'm dreaming about some simplification in this area.
Can you remind me what the sharding is for exactly? I've forgotten.
It's about reducing the amount of data needed to update on each write. So instead of updating the whole node, we shard it into several pieces, mainly the extent map of it. And hence, when write comes in, you need to update just a single shard other than the whole node structure.
Okay. For some reason I thought it was all in one key. I guess that would be over multiple keys then.
Yeah, so you have multiple keys, you have less amount of data to submit to RocksDB, but I've seen some issues with all these spanning blob stuffs in there. I've seen some odd behavior with these shards, which might become on one step we split the node in some shards. On another resharding attempt, this resharding is completely different, and this goes back and forth. And not to say it might be pretty expensive.
Igor, a lot of that stuff was implemented without any kind of real empirical testing regarding whether it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Just
So
so
it was proof of concept, I know.
yeah, exactly. And then it just became production code because it was there. So I think you're right. I think we need to do anything and everything we can to simplify and then figure out whether or not we should do this. And if we do, okay, fine, great, then we know it. But
Yeah, but unfortunately, it looks like there is no much space in improving the sharding itself, but we might need to refactor the whole node design. Maybe make this extend blob, this layout between offsets, logical offsets, extends, and blobs more static. So right now we have an ability to use up to 1 byte granularity in extend map, and potentially we might have 1 byte blob, and all this looks like an overkill and probably introduces plenty of complexities. Maybe that might be improved one day.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very similar to the ideas that Gabby was thinking about too. Like potentially like simplifying the like reducing the block sizes or that we're considering, and potentially maybe having specialized nodes for different types of data, like say an RGW object that's all written in one giant write, and or only appended to, and we already know what its size is going to be. You don't need to allocate tons of blobs for it.
well, yeah, Josh, I agree. That sounds like an excellent topic for next week when Adam is back.
Yes,
And
yes.
then yeah, we can try to get Gabby to come as well. Right now in Crimson, is this topic relevant for what is happening with C-Store? I haven't really been keeping up on what they're actively working on at the moment, but
Yeah, it's definitely relevant. I think at this point, they're working on a lot of the kind of low-level internal details of C-Store, not even hooking it up to like the object store interface yet. So
yeah,
it might be a little bit early to think about optimizing things, but thinking about the node structure for C-Store also makes sense. We have similar concerns regarding like what kinds of workloads and what kinds of requirements make sense for different kinds of objects.
yeah. Cool. Yeah, I definitely think that sounds good for next week. So okay. Well, does anyone have anything this week that they want to talk about or bring up? Basically it looks pretty much like I don't have anything else. So anyone have anything?
Well, maybe those my recent findings about performance regression in master. Well, actually, that's not exactly about regression, but under some scenarios there are some improvements, which we might want to backport back to Octopus. But well, as I said in my email, I don't think it makes much sense to try to fix this well, I'd say regression in master, since that's rather a corner case benchmark. But well, I'd like to hear from you. What do you think about all this stuff?
Can you remind me about why we needed to change the max blob size? Because that was the change that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, this max blob size impacts on the amount of on the search range when we look for blobs to reuse. So a wider the range might bring some negative impact on the performance. Other stuff is probably maybe something related to sharding as well, but can't say for sure. Actually, that's probably a good question why we need to cap the blob size unless we are talking about compression. And actually, I don't have good enough answer to that to this question. Maybe it's a good question, a good topic for additional investigation. If we need some caps on blob size.
Okay.
Igor, in that last or in the email that you sent out where you're giving benchmarking numbers, were those reads or writes?
No, that's this relates to the initial benchmark, which performs Rado's bench, right? Yeah, it was Rado's bench in write mode using 4 Mac writes by default. So I haven't tried anything else.
Is it with a smaller blob size, with a 64K max blob size? Do you see like more fragmentation on the writes, or is it more seeks that are hitting the disk because of it?
I presume that's it, but again, that was a pretty short investigation, so I tried to reproduce the issue. I found it for spinner only scenario, and so looks like some mix of iOS from DB and this user payload, which results in this drop. So I haven't seen any issues in when DB is at SSD drive, at standalone drive. But again, this is pretty artificial scenario. We have just a single client on idle cluster. So in reality, when I have different multiple clients working on the same drive, it's hard to say if we can see this regression in reality in this scenario. Well, I don't know. As I said, it was brief investigation to confirm it's present. And actually, one can observe this indeed, but not much after that.
Definitely kind of seems like a block trace would be interesting.
Well, first of all, I'd like just a confirmation from somebody else that the precondition like spinner only scenario. That these preconditions are valid and are reproducible in other environments. So maybe just start with reproducing this in different environments, just to make sure it's, because even for the reporter, he didn't report it for this specific scenario.
With the reporter or with your test, Igor, did you take a look at the onode hit rates? It seems like decreasing the size of the blobs might increase the onode size, leading to fewer onodes in cache.
Well, in this case, I expect the regression is present for both SSD database and spinner database. So,
Josh, if this was on hard drives and if Igor was testing with VStart, I'm guessing he probably was not able to write out enough onodes to actually like really saturate a 4 gigabyte cache, unless he ran it for many hours.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. So I presume that's indeed just we update the use pattern for the spinner, and by introducing database access to spinner, we make it work in less sequential way, and hence we drop. So originally larger blobs provided better results, and now we operate on smaller blobs and much more frequencies, and that's the root cause.
How do we so if you have like a 64K blob or a 512K blob, how do we search for space for those? Is it likely that if you've got multiple 64K blobs, that in the scenario you tested it would be you'd get contiguous space, or is it likely that you would get space from different regions?
Well, it actually depends on the locator used, and if I'm not wrong, for master we use AVL or hybrid allocator, which always attempts to return continuous extent, and for Octopus we have bitmap by default, which might result in more fragmented space, and this should result in better performance for master, but that's not the case. So
Igor, didn't we change the default for Octopus also? We changed it to hybrid, right?
Well, first of all, I was trying 15.2.4, and which might not have hybrid locator enabled by default, but I don't remember exactly if that's true or not. So
yeah.
So in the worst case, it's bitmap which is used in Octopus, and in this case, we rather expect worse fragmentation, or in in the beta case, when hybrid is also also enabled in Octopus, well, the fragmentation should be pretty the same. That is, it should be continuous as much as possible, which is easily achievable for empty stores.
If it turns out that we have like a situation where we would benefit by having contiguous space, even if we have a smaller blob size, so if we have 64K blob size instead of 512K blob size, and if the problem is that it's not contiguous and we're jumping all over, doing seeks all over, could we do something like reserve the 512K and assign blobs contiguously in it, but then if we don't use it, just like give it back basically? Does that even make sense? I don't know. I might be recreating something we already used to do.
Well, this might help for reads, but for writes, you'll still, well, even if you have continuous space allocated, but you have multiple writes interleaved
Sure.
with some other access to this drive, you'll have
Yeah.
all 6.
And it's not deferred, right? Where this is just a straight write, so we actually are doing the seeks, right?
Yeah. But well, again, I think the first step in additional investigation should be something like a confirmation that this is observable at multiple in multiple environments. And secondly, we might want to make more relevant benchmark on a cluster under the load, where I expect we might have worse behavior for Octopus as well, and maybe this regression might be present in ideal scenario when single client is in use, but in reality it might be not that important. We can bypass it.
It's the benchmark case, right? That is everyone looks at. That's bad, right?
Yeah.
And it's always difficult to know for benchmark cases how much you should focus on them, make them good.
Yeah, indeed.
The other part of this that's irritating too is that it's hard drive, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
important because people are still using them, but it probably is less relevant on setups that have like a battery-backed controller, right? That have cache, local cache, write-back cache.
From one side, yes, but I've seen multiple complaints about enabling write caching for for Ceph. So it looks like the regular recommendation for now is to disable write caching.
Interesting.
I doubt anyone knows what's the root cause for that, but as I said, well, I've seen multiple complaints about performance regression when write caching is enabled. But maybe for advanced
Okay.
controllers, that's not the case.
I don't know. Some of those controllers are kind of goofy. We saw issues with them too, depending on which one it was. Years ago. Igor, remind me again, what's the benefit of on hard drive of going to a 64K blob size, max blob size?
Well, as I said time ago, I don't have perfect answer to this question. It looks like we just try to preserve the same ratio between allocation unit and maximum blob size.
And if we just leave the blob size at 512K, what would be the concern?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that we need to this maximum impacts the search range when we try to reuse blob. So if we have 64K maximum, then we need to go back to minus 64 offset and scan from this starting offset till plus 64K, so 128K total. And in this region, we are looking for extents and blobs to reuse. So if you increase the blob size, you expand the search range. Well, secondly, this to some degree impacts the maximum blob size for compression. Also, there are some additional limits there. But, well, actually, that's the question which worth some additional. What if we provide larger maximum, or even drop it at all? Maybe that's not that critical for non-compressed blobs. But from the other side, some stuff like sharing the blob or sharding them might be affected as well. So I can say the impact of these parameters is very straightforward.
Sure.
That's why I tried to preserve the ratio between the maximum blob and allocation unit. Actually, we have the same for SSDs. So originally we had like 4K alloc size for SSD and 64K max blob size for SSDs as well, and 64 allocation size for spinner and 512 blob size, so which is 16. No, it's a ratio of 8 or something like that. And hence, after reducing the allocation unit, I tried to preserve this ratio. Just to avoid any additional effects, but this also resulted in some impact.
Yeah. I think all of this stuff is so incredibly complicated with so many potential odd impacts in different ways that it's going to
Yeah,
be really hard to guess at.
yeah, yeah, and that's what made me talk about node structure simplification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another
I
good reason.
agree.
Because from one side it's hard to introduce any fixes current in current design, and hard to predict how this specific parameter change might impact all the things. But sometimes we need such changes, and they becomes a pain.
Igor, about a year or two, probably more closer to 2 years ago, maybe ago, I actually ported the new store code to work in master because I was just curious how well it would do. And it actually was not that slow, much slower than Blue Store with a much less complicated, uh, model, right?
Um, yeah, but um, first of all this additional functionality like checksums or compression,
Yeah,
which introduce additional complexity, and other stuff. The topic are the benchmark under different scenarios. So, say this sharding stuff might be invisible for simple benchmarks, but it comes to stand in more complicated ones.
yeah. The only point I was making is that it's not clear to me that all of the complexity with sharding and with the way that we do blobs and everything else in Blue Store, it's not clear to me how much advantage we actually get from it.
Uh,
I don't have an
well,
answer.
actually, currently it's a good time to revise all this stuff, since from one side we learn we gathered some experience in how it behaves on on issues which arise production and all this stuff. So now we better understand what we might need and what issues are there, and we might probably introduce a better design one day. More experience at this moment.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm
I could definitely a better place to make more empirical decisions now than before it was in production for years.
Yeah.
I guess another thing that
So,
you mentioned, like compression, I forget if Adam's already presented his results there, but he's been doing some testing around that and found that the current blob sizes are too small to be useful. So increasing the compression size, max blob size for compression is definitely something that we'll want to do as well. But it needs a lot more testing to figure out the effects of that and what is kind of optimal for compression versus performance. Yeah, I think you were saying something.
yeah, at a different level, I was going to just say that Blue Store has very quickly evolved with releases, and a lot of things that were relevant for Nautilus are maybe not relevant for Pacific. So at some point, Igor, if you would like to do a code walkthrough of the new aspects of Blue Store that people are not aware of, it might be something that people may be interested in, and also gives us a chance to go back and focus on aspects that we have probably been missing for a while.
I think that'd be very helpful as well, especially with like Gabriel joining and starting to familiarize himself with things. It helps to go through the code a bit and with a fresh perspective and kind of see what is necessary, what is not, and what kind of you might want to look at revisiting.
I have a feeling that what we will find, I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling that we're going to find that a lot of the really complicated stuff that we're doing there maybe is less relevant than we, thought at the time when we wrote it. We'll see, but it's just kind of my instinct.
I think that's certainly true for some
well,
things, but
well,
needs testing.
The main issue on all this path is that we don't have good enough benchmark scenario set which cover our main use cases. So we definitely can kill some stuff from the current Blue Store, but unfortunately we don't have good enough coverage for performance issues. So we might simply forget some issues we observed in those times when we introduced this or that feature or this or that option to Blue Store. And
a lot of the choices regarding some of the entire way it was written, though, where it was done really quickly, right after New Store. There was almost like a 3-week period. It was like right after when we were like a CERN presentation in Europe, like 3 or 4 years ago, when like a lot of that stuff initially landed. And I'm not sure we really did that much testing on it at the time to see whether or not how much it made sense or not.
Yeah, indeed. But
I don't know. I mean, you're right. We've done tons of stuff since then. We've changed a lot of stuff since then. But, kind of the initial model for how all of this worked was done pretty fast.
I mean, Igor, to your point about lack of sufficient test suites for performance, would it be worthwhile trying to enumerate the different scenarios that we see, like maybe the most common in the wild?
Not sure.
Or are you thinking more generally about like more realistic workloads rather than micro benchmarks?
What I tried to express is that some complications brought to Blue Store were caused by some findings we observed at those times, like sharding. So, for instance, I don't remember the detail, but something like that. That one day we discovered that we have plenty of DB access on each write, and this made us to introduce this sharding stuff just to reduce the data written per each operation. And I suppose there were plenty of such decisions along the Blue Store development path, but unfortunately we didn't cover this with good enough test coverage. So, right now we remember that sharding was introduced to avoid flood to RocksDB, but for many other features we don't have such information in our memory. We don't have test coverage as well.
A lot of these kinds of things, though, it's not a test that will tell us, right? It's like you might see some change in performance, you might see some change in CPU usage, but it's actually understanding where the code is actually spending time that kind of tells you, was this a good change or was this, not a good change, right?
Yeah, and moreover, we don't have good enough coverage. So we are not generally we are not able to check for regressions in performance. Well, at least myself. So in these conditions, it's hard to redesign existing code. So for features, we have more or less good enough coverage. So if we break something, we can find that quite easily. On performance, it's not that easy because it takes plenty of time to test. Again, we don't have good enough coverage. We don't have some not sure. I don't know how to say in English, but we don't have fixed hardware where we can perform all the benchmarks to detect regression. It makes not much sense to benchmark using this hardware this year and that hardware next year. So when you need test cases and we need some fixed hardware.
Igor, you should work with.
Sorry, one moment. Preferably not virtual one. Preferably not under additional load from something else. So you need to rerun these scenarios in exactly the same conditions.
Igor, this is perfect because you should work with Kifu on getting the scenarios you're talking about, the tests that you're talking about, into the Jenkins stuff that he and Radek were working on, because they have that working with classical OSDs now. It's like all basically there and ready to go. It just needs like useful test cases like you're talking about. It's fixed hardware, moderately fast hardware that has both hard drives and NVMe drives in it.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to set it up so that it wouldn't get like OS updates or other things changing it. We've got 4 nodes right now dedicated to this in Jenkins. All the same kind of node. All on a private network.
Yeah, that sounds promising. But anyway, that's a lot of work to do to have good enough performance coverage,
Yeah, I think
Certainly a lot of work.
that's something we've been striving for at least in the beginning of Pacific release, right? So I think Igor, from your standpoint, if you could just like describe the test cases that you're thinking of, if there are small like shorter tests that can finish fast enough, I think what Mark described is a perfect way to just get that integration done with Jenkins. But if there are longer running tests and there are aging tests or other kind of things that you're thinking about, then we might have to use some other hardware for it. But I think it's a good time for us to at least write down those test scenarios and see whether what we have is enough to start off something.
Well, I'd say we should probably start with some basic framework, maybe some trivial scenarios. So definitely I don't have good enough test suite or even thoughts about this suite and all these scenarios. So we are at the beginning of this long way. So let's start with some trivial scenarios and then extend them needed. But well,
I think too,
I can try to present some test cases, but well,
Yeah,
I
sure.
think it's
That's
important too to recognize that we may break things and make things worse before we make them better, right? Like
yeah,
that's what you were going through with the work that you were doing for the min-Alex size, right? Is that it got worse, but then you were able to kind of make things, if not
yeah,
better overall, much closer to what they were previously, while still getting the benefits.
yeah. But the issue now is that it's hard to reproduce all these benchmarks. So it's only me who can rerun them, and even myself, it's hard to do that after a while. So
If
as for regular unit testing and feature testing, we need something the same automated for performance, just for everyone to be able to rerun all this suite with a single button.
have you tried using CBT?
No.
I mean, that's kind of the idea where we're going with the performance CI stuff that we've been just talking about. Like the right now, the Jenkins jobs are triggered for any PR that has the performance label, and the idea was that we also have some longer running tests in a Truthology suite that might run on dedicated nodes in the future. But I think the first step, like you said, is just getting the kind of basics in place there. But
I do
I think it's going to
that
be it'll be like a very huge acceleration for us in the longer term if we can get those in place. And it might be a lot of work to get there, but once it's there, it'll save us a lot of trouble and time trying to run our own tests that are on different hardware and trying to recreate the same things over and over again.
exactly. And I think Igor, to your point, like I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I had worked on this performance suite in Truthology that literally anybody can go run. You don't need to know how to run CBT or how you need to set up Ceph. You can just run a test suite, and it'll run different kind of workloads for you. But again, the same thing, same problem exists, that we again don't have a common hardware that we are running these tests on. And that's also one of the aspects of the perf CI work, is that if we have some dedicated hardware that we can run these tests on, we can definitely incorporate the kind of workloads that you are thinking of, and have a baseline to maintain over weeks and months to look at.
Hey guys, I have a hard stop. I've got to go right now. I don't know if it's going to close out the meeting or not, but really good discussion. If I leave and it closes out, everyone have a good week. Otherwise, feel free to keep talking. So
Thanks.
I'll see you later, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, so maybe we have some like minimal tests right now in the CI system for Jenkins. But
Maybe might be a good idea to have some written overview on what we have now.
Yeah, exactly.
Then proceed with discussions and improvement on this.
Yeah, that sounds good.
It might be easier for you since you contact more often, but well, right now I have a few knowledge about all of this stuff. And
yeah, why don't you and I write up something and you send it to the dev list and about
Sure.
where the things are today, and we can go from there.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. I think it was a very good discussion today, and looking forward to getting this work and be more useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, Igor.
Talk to you
Thanks,
guys
Dan.
later.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.